Hey folks, Papa Boris here with another game from the 2025 Through the Ages World Championship. This is stage 3, the beginning of the 3-player games. I'm calling this the first one because it was the first one to finish, and it was the one I was most nervous about because Gandhi and Alexander are the two highest rated opponents in my group. Gandhi's conservative Glico is about 100 points higher than mine, and Alexander's is about 150 higher than mine. Maybe that's not super accurate. I'd like to think I'm underrated, but being conservative, these are, most likely much stronger players than me. And Alexander was currently leading the group. He was beating me by 2 points. I did well enough in the 4-player games. I actually had like a dream of maybe winning the group, so finishing ahead of him in the 2 3-player games that I had with him is really important because if I can get second and he gets third, or if I get first and he gets second, then I get ahead of him and I actually catch up or even get ahead of him in the overall standings. So I was really nervous in this game. Let's take a look at it. Gandhi grabs the Colosseum, the one wonder he can take, perfectly normal. You could, of course, take Cleopatra or Caesar, maybe with Cleopatra, try to get another wonder later, but nothing wrong with getting the Colosseum. I know some people don't like this wonder, but I do think that an extra military action is very useful, and I think the smattering of other benefits makes this a perfectly fine wonder to take, not one that I would try to avoid. Alexander, on his turn, decides to grab Cleopatra and Frugality. Interesting choice here. I kind of see the logic behind it because Cleopatra's going to give you rocks, so it makes sense to say, well, let me get an extra food then. I personally would still just take the urban growth. I'd want as many rocks as possible to try to get my Age A Wonder built as reliably as possible, and then if I want food, I could try to get food some other way. But nothing wrong with this either. I understand the point of it. So I was really happy, though, because it means I get to take Confucius and a free rock. Really great start to the game. Nice opening board. I got a good leader who gives me science. I got a rock. What could possibly go wrong, right? Okay, so Gandhi's up. Now, since he had a wonder, he's got to take a leader here, and he grabs Boudica. I've definitely avoided this leader a lot, and I'm trying to not be as prejudiced against her. Weidenbaum really seems to like her a lot, and she gets picked a lot at his games with other top players. I mean, it makes sense. You do get a free resource every single turn, and you get to choose which one. And yes, if you're one of the 2 weakest civs, which in a 3-player game is likely to happen, it just takes any one person to get ahead of you, then you get the 2 rocks, but, then you can use those to hopefully not be behind, and it really does seem like, having watched a number of Weidenbaum's replays with her, it's just really not that big of a deal, her quote-unquote drawback. You do just seem to get the resources with her a lot of the time. So if you've been ignoring her like me, try her once in one of your games and give her a shot, especially here because Caesar's going to fall off and there's no Sun Tzu. So there isn't a leader who's just going to give somebody a strength for free. On top of that, there is no Colossus and no Acropolis, which are the 2 wonders that would give someone a strength. So really, this is a great time to get Boudica, and Gandhi's off to a fine start. He plays her, builds a mine, raises population, just a totally normal here, first turn. Now, Alexander's first turn is anything but normal. He decides to pay 2 actions to grab the pyramids. Now, I realize I am speaking about someone who is over 100 conservative Glico rating points higher than me. I'm just take it with a grain of salt, man. Just take it with a grain of salt. I'm just saying my opinion, which could be horribly wrong. I don't like this move. I think that Library of Alexandria and the pyramids are both like top tier wonders, maybe even the best wonders in the game, even after the expansion wonders were added. I would never pay an extra action to take either one of them over the other. If library's here, I take library. If pyramid's here, I take pyramids. I don't think it's correct to spend an action, especially since you have Cleopatra here. And the library goes great with Cleopatra because wonders that have a 1-rock stage, you can kind of build them for free with Cleopatra when you have no rocks left over using her ability. So here there's a really nice normal turn. Play Cleopatra, build mine, take library, build first stage of library, and you get to have your cake and eat it. You're using Cleopatra's bonus, you're getting the rock, and you haven't had to do anything weird to accomplish that. You can still get a lab next turn, or if you get lucky and 2 rocks come your way, your 3 rocks from your mines, plus the 2 rocks, plus Cleopatra's bonus rock actually lets you survive the turn 2 doldrums in high style by just building this instead of building your second lab. I think that was such a strong option that grabbing the pyramids here doesn't make sense to me personally. Now, Alexander maybe just really likes having civil actions, but that's what he decides to do. He builds a mine, he raises population, which makes sense, by the way. Cleopatra's not doing anything, so it makes sense to raise population in case Gandhi or Alexander himself plays an event and it's the free temple to have the worker out. That's perfectly normal. And then he passes the turn. So on my turn, then, I'm very glad to get the library. I mean, I would have been glad to get the pyramids either way. So I was getting a good wonder no matter what. But I'm happy to have the library. I raise population. I prefer to have the extra... Sorry, I build a mine. I prefer to have the extra rock over the extra science from urban growth. Remember, this is kind of like when you get it from the draft, it's a choice. You can either get an extra science with it or an extra rock. I want the extra rock because there's some tiny chance that I actually am able to build the library sooner, and I can do that instead of a lab. Now that's very small because if I get a 2 rock event, I'm still only at 5 rocks. I would need another rock, so I need 2 events to give 3 rocks. It's, a bit of a tall ask, but it's possible, so I want to make sure to leave myself open to that. And then I raise population. Lately, I have been a little bit less obsessed with paying civil action debt and having a worker available in the early turns and trying to squeeze a little bit more out of it. It has been a little bit mind-opening to see in Weidenbaum's games against top players that he and his opponents seem to be a little bit more okay with not having a worker here for the possibility of the free temple event in Age A in exchange for, like, sneaking in an extra rock or something like that. But here there was actually nothing to do. I already built my mine. I don't want to take a speculative rich land, and I already have an urban growth, and there's not more than one building I want to build, so I just pay my debt, I get a worker out, and then I pass the turn. All right, so everyone has a good start. Everything seems fine. I get a bit of an awkward hand. For Confucius, you kind of want to get like some crappy tactic or something, so you can use, his ability, which lets him put anything he wants into the deck. But I have a trade routes agreement, which I don't really want to offer somebody. Like, it's not bad or anything, but it's like I want to play an event to get my science from Confucius, but then I don't want to play the Crusades, because the Crusades, I could get screwed by. So I'm going to most likely be playing the trade routes agreement, but it's just a little bit of an awkward situation there. All right, Gandhi offers me the naval trade agreement, and I go with it. It actually ends up being kind of important this game. The way I see it is like, yes, Gandhi gets +1 to colonization, but I mean, he's only got 1 card, and he spent his political action to do this, so it's going to be a while before this card is that's a colony gets played, even if it is a colony. And, he might be stuck with corruption because of this 1 less blue token and 2 extra blue tokens in Age 1. That gives you some extra flexibility. So I don't know if it's wrong for him to offer this to me, but I think it was correct for me to take it. I would do it again. If he had switched the roles, I think I probably would have actually declined because I don't know that 1 colonization is going to help me win colonies or make me confident enough to put colonies in the deck, and I do not want to suffer the guaranteed problem of having 1 less blue token. So if he's fine with it, I'm fine with it. All right, so it's his turn. He builds a lab, raises population, and he grabs irrigation. Now, this is a bit of an interesting turn here because I've noticed that I think I have been overvaluing irrigation. I've been treating it as like one of the big important texts from Age 1 along with Iron and Alchemy, but from watching Weidenbaum, it seems like maybe that's actually not correct because a lot of top players just go without this, even if it means kind of suffering in Age 2 without workers, and they wait for selective breeding or they try to get like some other solution like ocean liner service or something like that or winning colonies. Because, and I kind of get it, because like this, like I've said before, once you run out this bank right here, irrigation just completely dries up, and so you invested in this worker solution, but it's not a permanent solution. So it is a little interesting that he takes it for 2 actions, but on the other hand, what exactly else was he to do here? There wasn't really much else to do. You could say, hey, my turn kind of sucks, let me just pay 3 actions for iron. It's really aggressive. You could do the Alexander special, which is to take printing press and not build your second lab, though then you have to find something else to do with your actions, but then you get to, on your next turn, make a printing press as your second lab. Alexander did just this in the 4-player game that he won, I think. Yeah, in the game that he won, he did this, and it worked out really, really well for him. So maybe that was a consideration. But Gandhi, doesn't want any of this junk that's all speculative, so he just takes the irrigation, which has some use, and he passes the turn. So maybe a little bit of bad luck for him that there wasn't anything better for him to take from the top 4 cards of the Age 1 deck. All right, Alexander does play an event. It's planning, so let's take a look at it. This was a spicy one. With this one, we can either get a free temple or a free warrior or 2 science, and 2 science is really tempting, but I still think it's correct to take the free temple because it's just a lot of culture over the course of the game, and it helps you, like with theology, organized religion, get a boost up on fixing your happy faces. Alexander does indeed take the temple. He plays Cleopatra, raises population, builds the first stage of the pyramids, and of course he takes the printing press. Now, I gotta say, this is one of those things. It seems to be an Alexander special trademark move to do this if it's possible, to build the second lab as a printing press instead of as a lab. He kind of does this all the time now. All 3 games I've been with him, he's done this. And maybe sometimes it works out better than other times, so I don't know if I would call it a systemic error in his thinking or anything like that. But it does seem to be something that he's attached to and maybe isn't always justified. In this particular case, he could have not taken printing press and not built the stage of the pyramid, or just not raise his population, in fact, with the temple event having passed. Staying out of consumption and getting extra food could, be useful. And he could have grabbed iron. I mean, the iron is right here. Granted, his science is low. So maybe this was a time to say, well, let me, instead of building a stage of the wonder, let me build a lab. 1 action, take iron, 2 actions, and then, do whatever you want with your 3rd action. Take your next leader, or, get the worker out, or take the printing press even, whatever. So it was a possibility. Anyway, I know I was certainly happy that the iron was left for me at 1 action. That's quite a bargain in a 3-player game. So I play an event, I played the trade routes agreement, we all get free stuff. I could take 2 food, for later, but the way things are going here, I think 2 rocks makes a lot of sense. I get my free temple from the planning, and I could start building the wonder, or I could build a lab. And in this case, after taking my next leader, I think Eleanor's pretty good. I raise population, and I decide to go ahead and build this lab. I could have, again, stayed out of consumption, and I could have started my wonder and gotten an extra food. But what I want to do maybe next turn is research iron and just upgrade 2 mines. So I decided to start losing the food and not get a head start on the wonder. I draw 2 cards, and it's a really awkward draw because now it's 2 defense cards. So either I play a defense card, which feels bad in case colonies show up, or I play Crusades, which might cause me to lose 4 culture. So I was not a fan of that draw. I would have preferred a bad card in here so I could play it with Confucius's ability. All right, so Gandhi's up, builds the Colosseum, researches irrigation, passes the turn. Now, someone commented that, you can tell when it's lower ranked players because they'll research something at the end of the turn and then get no value from it. Again, I don't actually think that's necessarily a mistake on principle, because if it is something that you were going to do next turn for sure anyways, then you're paying your civil action debt. That said, in this specific situation, personally, I would have preferred to take theology to fix my happy faces later, or actually maybe my number 1 pick would be to take cultural heritage, because I've found that having 2 extra science in your pocket is really useful in some cases, and there is a code of laws coming, and it's just in the right spot where, if you don't take anything else, it's going to go here. So Alexander is probably not going to take it for 3 actions. And then, yeah, maybe I'll take it for 2 actions. It's definitely possible with Confucius. I could play an event and then pop it down. But I also have iron. So if I do play with Confucius, get up to 6 science, and then take and research Code of Laws, that is tempting, but it means that iron's going to be a while. So, it's possible that the Code of Laws actually makes it down to you, in which case having this to be able to research it next turn along with Boudica's ability is appealing. That's what I would have done differently. Not saying this is wrong necessarily, but that's just my take on his move. So Alexander is up, and he has actually a pretty good situation going here. We all get 3 cards from the event that he seeds, and now, after raising his population, he can take Leo, replace Cleo. I never noticed that! Take Leo, replace Cleo! Oh god, somebody make that into the Grammy-winning album of the year. Anyway, he then researches printing press, gets a rock, and builds a printing press. So now, this is actually quite a bit more valuable than a lab because it's an age 1 building, and it is giving him an extra science with Leonardo. So, pretty great turn here for Mr. Alexander, and he passes. So, on my turn, I play an event. Thankfully, I drew 3 cards from that a military thing. I forget what the event was. Oops. So we won't know what it was until later. But it was something I didn't mind playing. We all get 2 food. And then it's a question of what I want to do with my turn. I'm not 100% confident that I played this correctly. What you could do here, of course, is build your wonder and, do something else. Raise population or research iron or take a speculative urban growth or one of these theologies. That's a perfectly fine thing to do. You could also research iron and upgrade 2 mines. Now, I think my plan the previous turn was to do this. That's why I kind of did that weird turn where I opened up consumption for kind of no reason, is so that this turn I had 6 rocks and I could upgrade 2 mines. And I still think that's actually the correct thing to do. But then, if I do that, I will be at 5 rocks, and I will be 1 rock short of being able to build this wonder the following turn. So what I decided to do instead was actually build the wonder. But this does mean now that I'm behind on getting my iron up and running. And I'm not actually sure that getting the science up and running sooner is worth delaying the iron, considering that I have a leader that's giving me science, but I don't have a leader that's giving me iron. I also passed on the opportunity to get Code of Laws. I could have spent 3 actions, taken research Code of Laws, and then I still would have had 2 actions left. I could not have researched iron because I'd have been out of science, but I could have built 2 stages of the wonder, let's say, and gotten a head start to getting my science back. So I'm not 100% confident in this move. I'm not saying it's a mistake, but I'm not 100% confident in it either. But I did decide to go for this wonder, and then I took a theology to fix my happy faces later. I also replaced Confucius here because, with Confucius, one of the nice things about him is he synergizes pretty decently with Eleanor, because you can play other stuff with Confucius and then save all your events to play with her. Though these are all kind of risky events, so I might not necessarily want to play them, but I do have events to play, and I figured, let's go for it and start getting those military cards and that culture for discard now. There's still a lot of time left in Age 1. It's possible I made an error by playing her here instead of keeping Confucius around to generate me more science. The reason I have so many cards is because of the Age A event that drew everybody 3 cards. I think that was I drew 3 cards, let's discard them for points with Eleanor. But again, that is just points. Maybe science is more valuable than points, and it would have been smarter to keep Confucius around. For my last action, I take Theology so I can fix my happy faces, and you'll see I keep the Rebellion. One nice thing, by the way, about the library, I can keep an extra card, which is really, really helpful. That's the understated feature of the library that really matters sometimes, so it's nice being able to keep an extra card. I keep the Rebellion, because I figure with Theology, I can upgrade this temple pretty cheap and avoid the Rebellion and maybe screw over my opponents with it. All right, so now there's a little shift. Okay, Gandhi plays an event, and the Age 1 deck turns over. So far, everything's been going swimmingly. We've all got good wonders. I got iron ready to go. I am getting some science from my library. Everything is just nice and easy. All right, so Gandhi plays it. We all get a worker. Oh, isn't that lovely? It's just a great time to be alive and in the green fields of Through the Ages. He's going to take Swordsman. With the science discount from Colosseum, he can actually research them right now. He plays Machu Picchu, and he builds a sword. And in fact, he also upgrades his other sword. Now, you might look at that and think, that's kind of weird. Doesn't Boudica want to wait until someone else gets ahead of her so that she gets the 2 rocks for being one of the 2 weaker civilizations? Why is he building these swords? And you're going to think I'm an idiot, but honestly, that's what I was thinking. I was like, why is he playing those swordsmen? Well, there's actually a really good answer why he's playing those swordsmen without waiting for somebody to get ahead of him on strength, and that's because he freaking put strength events in there. But somehow this didn't occur to me, and I was just tra-la-la, living my best life over here without worrying about it, other than just going it's strange that Boudica wanted to make swords preemptively. So that's about to start happening. Now I want to talk a little bit about Machu Picchu here. I wouldn't have done this, but I can't justify why I wouldn't have done this. What I would have done is I would have taken Isabella, because she's a good leader to replace Boudica with. Boudica gives you a rock, food, or science, and Isabella gives you a rock, and she helps you win colonies, which he has that pact with me, so he's got extra help for winning colonies, and she gets 2 blue tokens, which counters the 1 blue token lost from the pact. So I would have taken Isabella here, but that would, of course, mean not doing Machu Picchu. The thing about Machu Picchu is, I can't justify it. All I can say is I've tried this in a lot of different games, and it just never feels great. Even if I get it down early, even if I have iron and irrigation, even if everything's going well, for some reason, this just never feels great. I don't know if it's too many rocks. I don't know if it's the actions that it costs to build, but for some reason, you'd think that a mini transcontinental railroad that also gives you a blue token and works on your farms would be fantastic. But for whatever reason, I just can't, except for by experience, say anything other than this doesn't seem like that great of a wonder, so I build it only in very cautious circumstances. And here, I think with Isabella, I just wouldn't have been able to pass it up. So I would have taken her, and now, of course, you can't upgrade your farm, you're 1 rock short, and you can't do much else. But okay, you take a speculative urban growth. There is an alchemy here. There's another alchemy in the deck. The theologies are both gone, so you're not going to upgrade your temple. But there are 2 alchemies popping around. Maybe use the urban growth, maybe you don't. I think I would have gone for that over the Machu Picchu. Okay, so Gandhi passed the turn. By the way, I will mention, he did spend 3 science researching irrigation. If he hadn't done that, he'd be at 5 science. And at 5 science, he could have taken Code of Laws and next turn researched it. So he could have actually gotten this Code of Laws, and you're going to see that Gandhi has some tough turns ahead where an extra action would have made a really big difference. Of course, then he would have had to not research something else, but it's something worth keeping in mind. I'm always conscious about it ever since someone pointed out, like, oh, you can always tell it's a low-ranked game. Hurts to watch you guys throwing the code, letting Code of Laws slide off the board. I'm always thinking about that when I review my games. So yeah, Code of Laws maybe would have been worth grabbing there for Gandhi if he had not researched irrigation. All right, so there's the trade routes agreement. We all get some science. Alexander builds a warrior because he's smart and realizes that there's probably some strength-based events here now. Even though the top one was a Confucius thing, he figures out what's going on here, and he's getting ready to do the warrior to block himself. He, of course, maybe just didn't have a defense card and was worried about the 3 strength difference between himself and Gandhi, and that Gandhi would go for an aggression. All right, besides this, Alexander finishes the pyramids finally and takes the Code of Laws. He grabs the frugality, and he actually passes on raising population. He's not corrupt, so he also grabs this somewhat speculative rich land, and the thinking is that now with frugality, he can actually get both yellow tokens out of the deck. We did get a lot of help here. We got the food event, and we got the free population event, and Alexander started with the frugality from AJ, so he's actually able to get out of this bank, which is a little bit unusual with the help of this frugality next turn, well in advance of the end of the age of age 1. There we go. Okay, so it's my turn. I play an event because I have to, and it's foray! All right, so I'm 1 strength away. If Alexander had not built that warrior, I would have won this on tiebreak. So it's the difference between the strongest player in the group and the person currently winning getting 3 rocks, or me getting 3 rocks. So this was a heartbreaker. And I wish this was the worst thing that happened this game, but this was just a little nibble, just a little teaser of what was about to start taking place. Well, belatedly, I built a warrior. And I get a fighting bend. I'm thinking, man, if only like that card had been won later, I would have gotten those rocks instead of Alexander, which is a huge swing to face against a really tough player still in age 1. But okay, I've got 4 actions left. What am I doing with my actions here? Because I had to build a warrior from this pressure and the belated realization of why Gandhi built those swordsmen. Now those 2 rocks can't go into my iron. So, this decision to get the wonder means that now I'm even further delaying the iron. But, okay, at least I can raise population, get the alchemy to maybe fix my science later, and get a rich land so that I can make 2 iron upgrades next turn, and then I research the iron. So I am researching at the end of my turn, but this is playing around Dark Ages a little bit, and I'm really, really sure that I'm going to upgrade my iron mines twice next turn. Alternate possibilities here, instead of taking the rich land and developing the iron, I could have taken Breakthrough. I also did not need to raise my population. I'm not corrupt, even without raising population. So I could have not done 2 of those things and taken a breakthrough for some extra science. That would have been reasonable, but I figured, I've got alchemy, I've got this wonder, I already have a cache of science saved up. Let's just be more economical with my actions, because actions are what I'm really worried about here. Also, warfare would have been a consideration instead of researching iron. I could have done it thanks to the extra hand size from the library, and that would have been potentially useful to get an extra military action and an extra strength in case, of close calls with the strength-based events that might be in the deck. Okay, so the previous military event was a foray. Had it happened next, I would have gotten 3 rocks instead of Alexander. What does happen next? Raiders. So now I'm not last, but it doesn't matter. I'm second to last, and that means I get raided. So now I missed out on the foray. I also now I'm going to lose 2 food. Gandhi upgrades 1 farm, takes Engineering Genius to help build the Machu Picchu. He upgrades the other farm, and he raises population. He now also needs to build another swordsman to avoid being corrupt. This may seem like an odd turn. I actually messed around with this turn a lot when I was reviewing this video, because he leaves Saladin here, he leaves Alchemy here, he leaves Breakthrough here. So it's like, wouldn't you have wanted one of those things? But it's and then he takes the Engineering Genius, but he still can't actually build Machu Picchu next turn. It's 1 + 3 is 4, 4 + 3 is 7. Even if Boudica takes a rock next turn, that's still only 8, and this thing costs 9. And you think, okay, well maybe you should have taken a rock this turn with Boudica instead of Science. He did take a rock from Boudica. So even with that and the Engineering Genius, he couldn't avoid corruption and leave himself with enough rocks to make the Machu Picchu next turn. I tried every kind of permutation I could. You can rewind this video, see if you find something that I missed, but I could not find a way for him to be able to build Machu Picchu next turn and not be corrupt this turn. And this pact actually is what screws him over. If he'd had one more blue token, it would have been possible for him to avoid corruption. Because, like, if you just think about it, right, if he doesn't build the swordsman, these 3 blue tokens are on the mines, and he's just corrupt. But if he had 1 blue token more, then he wouldn't have had to spend the 3 rocks to make that sword, and then he would, of course, been able to build Machu Picchu with a little bit of room to spare. 4 + 3 is 7, + 3 is 10, and the Machu Picchu costs 9. And then he maybe would have been able to grab one of these valuable cards instead of, like, upgrading his farms for the turn, which, again, he pretty much also did to avoid corruption. Now, if he didn't upgrade 1 farm, he would have had 2 more rocks saved and 2 blue tokens less in the bank, and that would have been okay. So then he would have had 3 rocks + 3 is 6, + 3 is 9. Oh, wait, what am I talking about? Yeah, so I miscommentated. I could not find a way to take 2 of these things, but he could have avoided upgrading 1 farm, then he would have had exactly 9 next turn, and he still could have taken his choice of Breakthrough or Alchemy. It's Saladin. I was trying to figure out a way to get Saladin, because I think it's just so good here. Right now, both leaders that are left in the deck are on the board. And if he doesn't take Saladin here, then Gandy's stuck with Christopher Columbus, which may or may not be any good if he doesn't have any colonies here. As I've talked about before, I really don't like taking Christopher Columbus as a gamble because oftentimes you just go all of H2 and never draw a colony. So Saladin, who I've now learned to appreciate, is really great because he gives an extra action. Gandy could use an extra action. He's low on science. It'll be hard for him to get a government. Just an action from your leader, even though it doesn't start until next turn, seems really, really good. But I couldn't find a way to take Saladin and not be corrupt and have enough rocks next turn to build Machu Picchu. So it was a tough turn for Gandy here, but this is what he did with it. I do think it would have been better to not upgrade a farm and grab Alchemy to fix his science, but he decides to get the food going. He gets the Legion, and he passes the turn. Okay, so Alexander's feeling a little bit vulnerable here. He plays Frugality and builds another warrior. He actually, in his hand, has a Legion, which is smart, which is good for him because it means he doesn't have to wait for this Legion that Gandy played to become public. He actually gets to play his own Legion and be, well, not quite safe. He's still 3 strength behind, so Gandy could go for it. It just takes neither of these being a defense card for the aggression to go through. He then gets the Code of Laws, gets an extra rock, raises population, clears out this bank with time to spare, and not having a leader or wonder that helps with that is actually kind of remarkable that he was able to get out of this. He builds another library for 3 rocks, pumping his science and his culture, grabs warfare for protection, and then the knights. Makes sense. Notice, by the way, one drawback of the line here of going for the printing press, there's an alchemy sitting right there in the 1 action spot. I mean, that's pretty awesome, but it's actually not that good if you go for the printing press stuff because now it's only upgrading 1 lab. If you take alchemy, research it, upgrade both labs, you are getting 4 science with 2 workers. Right now, Gandy's getting 3 science with 3 workers. So it's less science and 1 more worker. So there's a price to be paid for the printing press lifestyle. All right, so Alexander's very vulnerable. It's just 2 military actions and 3 strength behind Gandy, but, you know, maybe he was gambling that I wouldn't be able to get ahead. And certainly, it's a little bit of a weird spot for me because how exactly am I supposed to develop my strength? Make a warrior? Whoop-de-doo. So Alexander is vulnerable, but I am more vulnerable. I have the same number of military actions that he does, and, you know, I'm just in a spot where Gandy's going to want to aggress on me because it's more likely to go through. So what do? Well, I can't make any more workers, but it seems pretty essential here that I take the monarchy. Do I actually not play an event? Oh, wow, I don't play an event. I'm like, I don't want to get hit by whatever this crap is, and I don't want to put a colony in there. So I don't play an event. I miss out on Eleanor's bonus, which is tough. But I take the monarchy and I play it. It helps me with civil actions. Of course, it also gives me an extra military action. And I was like, you know what, this sucks, but I actually can defend against Gandy now. 2, 4, 5, 3 military actions, and I can stop an aggression. I don't want to spend my defense cards on that, but I can, and I figured that was the best I could do. I could have played a Great Wall. I could have put that under construction, but it's going to take a lot of actions to build, and I need to do stuff. I got to upgrade my mines, and it'll be like another couple of turns after that. We're going to be in age 2. It's possible this still would have been the correct thing to do. It would fix my happy face, my next one, not requiring me to do theology, and it would have given me 2 extra strength, not to mention the culture. So maybe I should have gone for it. But instead, I upgrade both of my mines. And now with my last action, I grab this drama. Drama's a little weird this game. There's no Bach. Shakespeare, but you also need a printing press, which I don't have, or a journalism, which is only 1 copy of in a 3-player game. Basically, it's for Gaudi that I take the drama. Chaplin is not great with drama. Marlene is good with drama, but she's not here, and Ian is not here either. So drama is not the best speculative grab, but I just didn't have anything else to do with my action, so I took it, I passed the turn, and I drew 3 cards. Happy I have a card I can actually play into the deck. And it's Gandhi's turn, and he does go for an aggression. He tries to raid me. I actually thought about letting it go through, but I didn't want to give him the rocks that he needed to finish Machu Picchu, and I thought I can actually crawl out of this hole now that swordsmen are here, and so maybe there's no reason for me to take this. Like, that's sometimes why you just allow an aggression to happen, is you hope that, well, if I let this one happen, then maybe a worse one won't happen later. Like, I'll save my defenses for that. But I figured I might be able to just not be aggressed upon anymore. It was not easy for him to develop his strength further, so I just decided to block it. All right, he grabs the iron, he grabs Columbus, he builds a stage of Machu Picchu, he plays Columbus because this is his last chance to, like, avoid, losing his leader, and then he raises population to avoid corruption. He decides not to build a warrior here, not giving up a draw, which I was very happy to see, because I'm still going to get to be safe, and then he passes the turn. Alexander plays an event, and it's border conflict. So I've missed a foray, I got raided, and I got hit by this border conflict, and this is going to be really significant, this border conflict. It's going to have an impact on the game. So it's rough, man. It's just rough and tumble. But I guess the one lucky thing is this happened after Gandhi's turn. If it had happened before, he could have finished Machu Picchu a turn sooner, so at least there's that. All right, now Alexander decides to put under construction the Forbidden City, which is an interesting choice. I personally wouldn't have done this just because, I'm thinking I already have 6 actions. And yes, this has another effect as well. And it takes, a bunch of actions to build. So I typically wouldn't go for that in this spot. But then again, what actually else is there for him to do? He has the science and the rocks to upgrade his farms and mines, but there's no irrigation and there's no iron. The irons have all been taken, but the irrigation just didn't show up. And it's kind of hard for him to find something else to do with his turn. Now, he's got 4 actions left to spend. With them, he researches the warfare, he builds a couple of stages, and he grabs the reserves so he can, just get some food or build something in the subsequent turn. He's got a ton of actions, so taking 2 actions to get 2 rocks or 2 food seems reasonable. What else would he have done with 3 extra actions here? 2 for taking this wonder, and then 2 for building 2 stages of it. I mean, there's things he could do. He could grab the cartography, though that does sort of strain his 4 science production, which we're getting into H2 is about to get a little bit slighter. He could have taken a breakthrough because that would help him research more stuff. So maybe you say cartography and breakthrough. Maybe you say swordsman. And instead of researching the warfare, you research the swordsman, upgrade some swords. That would mean that he would be at 7 strength, though, because it means he's not researching the warfare, and he would then have a very low count of defense cards, or military cards. So I think it's actually fine to take the warfare, get more draws, and then do the swordsman thing later, but maybe you could have taken swordsman for later instead of putting this wonder under construction. However, the age is about to end, and he is about to have happiness problems, because these 2 workers are about to disappear. This wonder solves that problem, and without relying on the bread and circus being here, which whether or not the bread and circus is still even there on his next turn, he doesn't have to spend actions taking it, researching it, and building it when he doesn't have an economy going. Alexander is in a really good position here. He's got good culture, he's got the best science, but he didn't manage to get either food or rocks in age 1. Actions, though, they do count, so he's got that going for him. But not having to spend his limited resources to build a bread and circus, and instead, let's say, we're going to say he's spending 5 extra rocks to make the Forbidden City to stop the corruption problem, does make sense. I don't think I would have made this move. I do think it actually makes sense when you look at it. So it was a reasonable option for Alexander given the difficulties he was facing, and maybe a good exception to my general principle of not going for the Forbidden City if you already have good actions, in this case, pyramids and code of laws. All right, so it's over to me. And on my turn, as the age begins, I play an event, I get a defense card, which I'm very happy to see, I get some science, which I'm very happy to see, And now I'm going to need to blow up one of my urban buildings, farms, or mines thanks to the border conflict. And I think the thing that makes the most sense is to blow up this mine, because basically then if I build a mine, all I really lost was 2 rocks, which, okay, 2 rocks is a significant number of rocks, but I could rebuild that mine, and I basically only lost 2 rocks. I didn't lose an action because I was going to spend an action upgrading it anyway. However, I have some kind of like a mine virus or something. What I do is I take cartography, because I put a colony in there. I research it so that I'm a little bit safer from Gandhi's aggressions, and then after taking swordsman and breakthrough, so I can research it next turn and fix up my strength some more, I decide to build a temple. And I think I did this because I put rebellion in here, I think. So that would mean that if I didn't do that and the rebellion showed up, I would lose 2 civil actions. I just didn't have enough juice. It was 1 science short of being able to research theology and upgrade it. Now, maybe that would have been smarter. Maybe I should have, instead of researching cartography, let the colony go, research the theology, and upgraded my temple to avoid the rebellion that way. Or maybe I should have even just risked it and risked losing, 2 civil actions for my 1 unhappy worker. Gandhi would have been safe, but if it flipped up early, Alexander would have actually been quite hurt if it happened before his turn and he didn't get this Forbidden City finished. So maybe that would have been better, but what I decided to do is kind of like leverage the border conflict. This used to be a mine, it blew up, and I turned it into a temple. It's clever, but not necessarily smart. Sometimes I feel like I get a little bit wrapped up in trying to make lemonades out of lemons, trying to, get the silver lining, like, oh, that border conflict wasn't actually bad, it's what I would have wanted to do anyways, but maybe it's a little bit delusional to think that turning a mine into a temple is actually smart. So anyway, I get to keep all the cards, which is nice. I have a choice of tactics now. I draw 2 more, and then I pass the turn. So Gandhi's up, plays an event, and it's a strategic territory, which I believe I put in there. And I am able to win it from this, which I got off of Eleanor. I got this before I even drew H2 cards for the first time. I got it off of her ability, so that's really, really strong. And now I lose a worker or warrior and a fighting band. That's 2 strength lost, but I get the 2 strength back. And, hopefully I find a new card to replace the card I had to spend to win it. But the cartography was relevant here, got me to exactly 5, letting me get this thing with just a single warrior. All right, so Gandhi finally finishes the Machu Picchu. He gets the iron, and he upgrades it. That's his whole turn, very principled turn. So Machu Picchu is online right at the beginning of Age 2. It's not as good as you can hope, but it's pretty darn good. It's pretty fast online operational Machu Picchu. But he doesn't have any actions, and so hopefully that is the compensating factor and will keep him in check. He also doesn't have science fixed yet. Alexander is up, he plays an event, and it's another territory. I would have actually probably liked this one more than the strategic territory, but I don't have the ability to fight for it anymore, so I bid 1 warrior. I could have maybe bid 2, and I don't know if I would have won it or not. Alexander might have bid 5, I'm not sure, but I decided that would have been a little bit aggressive. The problem with bidding both my warriors is that if I had... Oh, no, I don't have both, right? I paid 1 to get the other colony, and then the next colony came around before my turn. Right. And I didn't get any more defense cards. Had I gotten another H2 defense card from the draw from the colony, I actually maybe would have won that colony. Even at a bid of only 4, Alexander still actually had to pay 2 warriors and 2 defense cards to get it, which is good to see because now he's a bit vulnerable and he's low on cards. So on his turn, he finishes the Forbidden City. He builds back a warrior, and he takes coal to fix his rocks. Now, he's still kind of vulnerable here. Gandhi is 5 strength ahead of him, and he's only got 3 military actions. So after playing this reserves, he takes a rather unorthodox move. He grabs the other reserves and then blows up a mine. He then turns it into a warrior, so he's safe from Gandhi's aggressions. It's an interesting line, because next turn you can research coal and upgrade a rich land, so you're just missing a rock for it. I don't know if he needed to do that. In this particular case, he could have, instead of playing this reserves for 2 rocks, saved it, and then next turn played both reserves for food, and then he could have gotten a worker out of here. That would have required him spending a turn at a reduced strength. Basically, here he spent a military action, or 2 military actions, to make 2 warriors. He could have instead spent 3 military actions to play a warrior and turn on fighting band. Then his strength would have been 1, 2, 3 for the fighting band. 4, he would have been 3 behind Gandhi. Granted, because he spent those defense cards and he spent all 3 military actions doing that, he wouldn't have actually been able to get any draws. So he would have been vulnerable there. In a way, he isn't now. But he could have maybe risked it for a turn. But Gandhi has started drawing H2 stuff, so I do kind of see why he preferred not to risk that and instead took this unorthodox line, essentially treating a coal as a battery to not have to have all of his workers on mines. Okay, I'm also feeling a little bit vulnerable here, but luckily I have a way of dealing with the situation. After playing an event, we all get some science. I play Swordsman, and now I research alchemy as well. I upgrade alchemy, and I also make a sword. So I am able to get well within reach of Gandhi, so that with this pile of cards that I have in 3 military actions, I'm completely safe. In fact, what to do with my other my other civil actions, I decided to make a decision that's very consequential here. In addition to this irrigation, I'm still kind of hoping I don't use it. I'm borrowing an idea here from Weidenbaum, where he'll sometimes take irrigation, but then wait for selective breeding. There are 2 copies of selective breeding in the game, and Gandhi already has irrigation online, and because of Machu Picchu, he doesn't actually want to upgrade both of these to selective breeding. He doesn't actually gain anything doing that. So selective breeding is really minimal for him. It only affects 1 upgrade. It's like 5 science and actions for 1 more food. He's almost certainly not going to take it. So there is enough selective breeding for both of the players who would want it. I take it, but keep it as a backup. The other move, though, is I take the masonry. It ends up being pretty substantial in this game, helps me finish wonders, and it's something I wouldn't have taken in the past, but having seen a really strong player show how he values it somewhat highly, I figure, hey, let's take this. It'll make my other lab upgrade cheaper, it'll make my theology upgrade cheaper, and it might help me build some wonders cheaper as well. I'm sad to see Ocean Liner here. It's going to pass away, but on the other hand, I was maybe not in the greatest of positions to be able to build it regardless. I also pass on Opera from this line. I could have given up either Masonry or Irrigation to take it and have a way of getting culture, but there is another copy of Opera, and there's no box, so I'm not super concerned about Opera. For now, I'm just kind of in survival mode here, trying to get past this weird economic situation that I'm in. I toss away a bunch of cards. I keep this one. This is the 2 infantry and a cannon, so I'm trying to get a cannon here to turn on this tactic, and I draw some more events. All right, Gandhi's up. He takes the Opera. He upgrades a mine, raises population, and grabs an efficient upgrade to help upgrade his other mine. I've talked about this in the past. This is a move that must be done with care, because if you had upgraded your mine right now, you would have gotten a rock. By taking this, you are giving up that rock and then getting 3. So this is not worth 3 rocks. This is only worth 2, and it's worth 2 rocks and an action. So it's an action for 2 rocks, which, okay, an action for 2 rocks could be fine, but you do have Machu Picchu with iron here. Had he just upgraded, he would have paid one of his civil action debts away, and at 4 actions, that seems really valuable to me. On top of that, he would be making 8 rocks per turn, so he doesn't necessarily need rocks. With only 4 actions per turn, getting 2 rocks for 1 action is not a priority when your rocks are not the problem. So I do think that this may have been, I might tentatively dare to call, a slight inefficiency in Gandhi's turn. Also, he took Opera. He could have taken Journalism, which I think makes some sense because Journalism and Opera, there's an extra copy of each in the deck. And, whichever one he doesn't take, he can take the other one later. But in the short term, Journalism makes more sense because he gets science from it. And that's a big deal when he's only at 2 science. He doesn't yet need the Happy Face. He still needs to take 2 workers out for the Happy Face to matter. So I would have actually preferred the Journalism and the Mine upgrade instead of the Opera and the Efficient upgrade. Or dare I say, the Inefficient upgrade. Hey! Okay, so he passes the turn, and Alexandra's up. By the way, Gandhi also passed on Republic, which he would have the following turn had the science to research, fixing his actions. I really do need to mention that. How would he have maybe done that? Well, that's a little tough. He had to do this in order to avoid corruption. He could have passed on the Efficient upgrade and on the Opera to take the Republic, though then he wouldn't have been able to upgrade his other mine. But it was worth considering. I mean, obviously, there are 3 other government cards in the deck. Maybe he just wanted to wait for a more opportune time to grab one. Maybe he would have done it if he'd had the science to do it right away. Maybe that's what he's waiting for. But it's just something to consider. Anyway, Alexandra develops coal, fixes his rocks. He grabs Scientific Method, which is interesting because he still only has the 1 lab. In a weird way, it's worth considering Journalism, inefficient as that may seem with printing press. But when you already have 2 printing presses, the cost from upgrading a printing press to a journalist is the same as the cost of upgrading a lab to a scientific method. But journalism gives them the opportunity to do that twice, whereas scientific method only does it once. Now, scientific method from a single lab increases science production by 2, whereas journalism, you have to upgrade both to get a science increase of 2. So I'm not saying that he was wrong to go for that. It's just something to think about. He also passes on the Republic, even though he could get it somewhat soon, because he does have a lot of actions, and I imagine he was waiting for constitutional monarchy because he would have needed more military actions that would have been more valuable than the extra civil action from the Republic. He grabs urban growth, and he puts the Kremlin under construction for his last few actions. Now, the Kremlin's an interesting one. It does kind of work with Forbidden City, because he still has another, happy face in the tank, so to speak, and it gives him culture and a military action, both of which are things that he needs. I wonder what else he could have done with 2 civil actions. I think one possibility is to take strategy, because he has warfare, so strategy doesn't really make much sense. So yeah, there's actually not that much else for him to do. He can pop a reserves just for the hell of it. He would be 1 rock short of being able to upgrade a mine with that and take a journalism or something. There's nothing that great to do. So I think with a low opportunity cost of spending the 3 actions to put this under construction, it was a reasonable course of action to take here. All right, so for me, I play an event. I'm kind of in survival mode. Freaking pestilence hits, so now we all lose a population, and I don't have a spare worker, so this is really, really painful. But after being in survival mode for quite a while, I do have culture thanks to Eleanor. My science is all right compared to my opponents. My rocks are okay compared to one opponent. My food, I have a problem. I still haven't fixed it. But after getting hit with all this stuff, I finally have a little bit of a break. I got Robespierre and Republic that just landed in my lap. Normally, I would never think about doing Republic. And there is a cost of missing a turn's worth of draws and 2 science. 2 science is not nothing, plus the opportunity cost of not taking another leader, such as Gaudi, who was here and who I could have taken. But I figured this is just too much to ignore. So I take a kind of a weird line. I blow up this temple that I built a while ago. So that was a waste of an action and 3 rocks, it turns out. And I grab Robespierre, I grab strategy for the future. I do need the military actions if I'm going to go for the Republic. And it's right there. It's just right there on the 1 action spot. I replace Eleanor, getting back 3 actions, which is actually significant because now I can take the Republic, spend my military actions to revolt into it. I have a ton of actions now all of a sudden. It's always kind of funny when you spend 4 actions and somehow have way more actions, 1 more action than you began the turn with. And now I upgrade my other lab and I get the railroad under construction. Now, maybe it would have made more sense to get the masonry down before upgrading the lab. I couldn't do it this turn, but I could have waited on this lab upgrade in general. But I decided to get my science up now, and I want to put this under construction for the strength, and also because it's kind of like an extra worker. Since I, have only 2 mines, this is a way to sort of get an extra one and pretend that I never threw a worker away. And then also, when you're behind, take risks. There is a chance now that I can get oil early in H3, which would be a very strong combo with the Transcontinental Railroad. So I figured it was worth it. If you do this, I think it is important to grab the reserves because I'm not going to be able to finish this for the next turn. So if I want to have any chance of finishing at the turn after, I really need to have these reserves. And my last action, I actually do nothing. There's nothing else for me to do, but I think it's important sometimes to not find some weird thing to do just so you spend all your actions. I could have been oh, maybe I should take patriotism instead of the reserves because that uses up all my actions. But no, I really actually need the reserves. I needed to finish the wonder, and I'd rather leave an action and suffer the psychological consequences than take something that's not as good for me on my turn. Gandhi's up. He plays an event. It's Rebellion, so it was in the bottom, so I could have not made that temple and gotten away with it, though I had no way of knowing that. Nothing happens with the Rebellion. We all fixed our problems. He's going to grab Gaudi, research him, or put him into play. He's going to grab the cavalrymen, and I'm sad to see this, he goes for cavalrymen right away. So now, and he even has a medieval army. That actually doesn't change his strength, but it means he's got these 2 workers to spare to throw into colonies. And once again, we're a little vulnerable here. I technically could get aggressed. In fact, I don't have defense cards. He could hit me with an aggression. Alexander is in the same position. So Gandhi does a nice balanced turn here. Good use of 4 actions. He has everything that he needs, and he's applying pressure on his opponents. But you notice how he didn't actually have an action left over to upgrade his mine? Yeah, this efficient upgrade now has cost him 2 rocks to take. So this is only a 1 action for 1 rock card now. So again, that's why I think sometimes you really got to think about doing the upgrade instead of taking the efficient upgrade. All right, he is corrupt as well. Passes the turn, and it's over to Alexander. So Alexander grabs selective breeding for 3 actions. He doesn't want to wait because he loses a farm to the pestilence. So this allows him to fix his food. Now his economy is not as good as it looks. He does have both H2 production technologies, but he's only got 1 worker on the food and only 1 worker on the coal. So he's not in like the best of shape here. He plays reserves for 2 rocks, which I find interesting. He could have done it for 2 food and gotten an extra worker out. He does have the Forbidden City here, but he is trying to get this wonder built, so that does make sense. And then he upgrades another mine with those rocks, so now he's got half of his cost of the wonder making every turn. The problem is that he is vulnerable now to Gandhi doing an aggression, and we've seen now twice that Gandhi is not afraid to chuck out aggressions. He did that one on me one game when we had the open borders, and he chucked another one at me this game. So it is a risk if Gandhi has a good aggression in hand. This line, instead of, for example, building knights and making a knight or something, does carry some consequences. Also, despite having 7 actions, he does fail to take the cannon here. Now, there is another copy of cannon in the deck, but not taking it right now ends up being pretty important in this game. So on my turn, I play an event, and it's Scientific Breakthrough, which is really, really nice because it actually lets me research the strategy. You'll notice that after I research strategy, I have 4 science left. My turn production is only 5, or my turn production is 5, so if I hadn't gotten the 5 from the breakthrough, I would be at -1. So now I am safe from Gandhi's malign intentions, and what do I do with my turn? Well, I think what you need to do here, obviously, is grab the cannon, maybe even upgrade a sword here so that you're using your extra military action, not costing yourself a draw, and tying Gandhi in case it matters for tie breaks with events. But I make a little bit of a weird line here. I raise population, I take cannon, I take the patriotism, which is all fine, and I take organized religion. And honestly, I don't know why I do that. I think, I have a theory. The reason I do this is I just forgot that I had theology. I don't think it's worth 2 actions and 2 extra science to get an extra happy face. Like, not that I'm mad about having this later in the game, but I think theology would have been just fine. And I do think it was a mistake to take this organized religion there for 2 actions. I definitely had things to do with my actions. Here I play the reserves, but like as far as actions go, if I had 2 extra actions, I mean, I would have been delighted to, let's say, play a masonry, because I want to do that before making this wonder at a frugality. In this case, I've already upgraded the lab, so masonry wouldn't have saved me any rocks, but it would have gotten me ready for theology. It saves me a rock there and saves me 2 actions here. So it's well worth the action it costs to play it. I think that this was just a mistake. Okay, but I'm finally ready to build the Transcontinental Railroad, and I get a draw. These 3 cards end up being all 3 very significant in this game. The War over Technology, the Vast Territory 2, and the Defense card. So it was a very significant draw of 3 cards. We're going to go over now to Gandhi's turn. By the way, I didn't make a sword for 1 rock because I need exactly 12 rocks to get this wonder, and I wasn't able to get any other rocks from the row. So I do want to make sure this wonder gets built. I think it's important with H2 wonders. Build them fast. Don't dilly-dally. All right, Gandhi's up. He declares war over territory on Alexander, and he does a very simple thing. He just gets the rifles, raises population, makes another horse, and he's got 16 strength. Alexander is caught with his pants down a bit. He has just not much that he can do about this war. He could, of course, research riflemen on his turn and upgrade all of these rifles. Actually, upgrade 2 of them. He's only got 6 rocks and no yellow cards that help with military. It costs 3 rocks to upgrade, so he can get 4 extra strength, go to 10. But that's it. There's not much else for him to do. So Gandhi's guaranteed pretty much to steal 2 yellow tokens. And if Alexander does nothing, he's actually being threatened to lose 3. So it's a really smart time to do a war and build up his military. He even has 2 actions left over. So he raises population, upgrades this, which he could have done 3 turns ago instead of playing the efficient upgrade. And the ultimate irony is that he doesn't even play the efficient upgrade, because if he had, he would have been corrupt. Yes, that is one of those things where, okay, you can't just say because something had a bad consequence that it was or was not, right or wrong. You have to judge based on probabilities, etc. I know all that, so just because it had the really bad outcome doesn't mean it was bad, but I think on general principles, it would have been reasonable to upgrade this mine those turns ago instead of taking the efficient upgrade. All right, so we passed the turn here. Alexander is in a very bad shape. He plays an event, and it is new deposits. Now, normally, when something like this happens and a war's been aggressed upon you, it's really, really good, because you get some surprise rocks your opponent might not have been accounting for when they declared the war. But weirdly, it's actually not that great. Now he can research Rifleman and upgrade all 3, but that still only gives him 6 strength, so he loses 2 tokens. Or is it 2 tokens? No, it's 1. It's 1. I beg your pardon. It's 1. It's 1 plus every 5. Yeah, so he can get 6 strength and only lose 1 yellow token. But that is a lot. That would be spending, what is this, 9 of his 12 rocks, delaying this wonder by more than a turn, because if he spends 9 rocks, 3 plus 6 is 9, he can't build it next turn without spending 3 actions to take Engineering Genius. But yeah, he could do that. He could spend 3 actions, take in Research Rifleman, 3 actions, take Engineering Genius, upgrade all of his rifles, spend all 3 military actions, discard down to 3 cards, and then be at 12 strength, where if none of the cards are a defense card, then Gandhi can aggress upon him. It's just a really awkward spot. So even with the 12 rocks, he's not exactly able to muster up some kind of a significant defense. And yes, there's the knights here, there's the cannon here, but if he doesn't have the right tactic, it's not great. And even if he does, what is he doing with the cannon? So he plays cannon, researches it, blows up a lab, builds a cannon, 3 strength. Okay, now what? He's got an outdated, what is it called? Medieval army? Defensive army? Medieval army stage 1. This is outdated, so it's only worth 3 strength. He's already getting 2 strength from Legion. It's only 1 extra strength. So it's like he can get 3, 4 strength. It's not really changing anything significantly. So Alexander decides not to go all in and lose 2 yellow tokens instead of losing 1. So for the price of losing an extra yellow token, what he gets to do is build his wonder, get extra military action, get extra civil action, get extra culture, and he does a clever thing here. He takes the navigation and researches it. Yeah, the colonization is great. We all got colonization here. Gandhi and I both made some sacrifices to do it, so he's got to figure we're playing colonies into it. And the 2 strength means he's losing only 2 workers instead of 3. So it's a very elegant way to fix the problem of how do you not lose 3 tokens. Then he researches scientific method and actually upgrades that lab in order to buff his science up. This actually buffs his science by 3, 2 for the difference in the labs, and then an extra 1 for now having an extra higher level from Leonardo, though that isn't going to last for long. This does mean he doesn't take the cannon or the rifleman, or Maria Theresa, who might have been handy with her rocks for getting out of this hole. So it's possible that Alexander left a little bit too much on the table, but then again, that's kind of the consequence of getting the Kremlin. If he hadn't put that under construction, he would have had, 3 extra actions with which to take cards and not feel like he was falling behind on something. There's a price to be paid for undertaking these Age 2 wonder projects. Now, unfortunately, I mentioned, okay, that new deposits was bad for him, even though normally it's good. Well, it was actually not just not helpful. I mean, yeah, it helped him build the wonder, but it was like actively bad for him, because these new deposits give me 4 rocks. And that means I can declare a war over technology in Alexander. So it's a pileup now. With a ridiculous 16 rocks, I slap down masonry, spend 2 actions to build the railroad. Boom, there's 5 strength. I now research cannon, which I have exactly enough science for thanks to that scientific breakthrough earlier. I play patriotism, and with my 7 rocks, I can make a cannon and even upgrade the last sword so that my defensive army is up to date, going up to a ridiculous 24 strength against 8 on Alexander. Now, I don't know if there's any way for him to have seen that. There's only 1 copy of this in the deck. I mean, it's kind of a weird thing to try to think about or plan ahead. I needed to have the tactic and the war. I don't think his turn was wrong just because this happened, but it is absolutely a calamity for Alexander. And I was kind of hoping he would resign, because that would guarantee that he comes in last. Then if I can beat Gandhi head-to-head, maybe I can pull something out. He's still on 4 actions. His position's better than mine. His economy's better. But I do now beat him on strength. His culture's not that amazing yet. And the actions. He hasn't fixed them yet. So I was hoping Alexander would resign to guarantee that he can't come back in this game, but credit to him, he doesn't. And I think it's correct. I don't think it makes sense to resign here. Yes, you've been hit hard, but who knows what might happen. One player might do a huge war against another and suck him down, and you steal a second place. So credit to him for having the mental fortitude to withstand the psychological onslaught of having one person declare a war on you and then have another person declare another war back to back that you just have absolutely no chance of surviving. I take the Rifleman. It's sort of a weird line. Gandhi already has them, and with the selective breeding I'm going to take, they would have fallen off before Alexander got there. This is to give myself options, I guess. You know, I like to take the H2 military tax to open myself up to tactics. And I take selective breeding to fix my food later, and I pass the turn. So now Gandhi's up. He steals 2 tokens from Alexander, swipes them. He then does a spy, which goes through, which is interesting, because by spying, he's preventing Alexander from researching a military technology or doing anything that might help him in his war against me. So maybe Gandhi was thinking, yeah, maybe now Alexander will resign. Maybe he was trying to do the knockout blow to get him to quit. Maybe he thought that 5 science was going to help him more than whatever me stealing more science from him was going to help me. I mean, I am doing a war of technology, so really all I'm doing is just stealing more science. So maybe he thought that wasn't going to matter because he gets science, I get science, everybody wins. So it's a number of things he could have been thinking, but it is something to consider. Not saying he was wrong, just something to think about is that when you do a move like this, you are helping your other opponent get more from the war against the player who's most likely already been knocked out of the game. He grabs the Constitutional Monarchy, researches it. He did not need the spy to be able to do it this turn, although this does give him more science to work with on subsequent turns. He grabs the journalism now that he didn't take earlier when he had opera. He researches it. He makes a journalist. He's got really good culture now, and he passes the turn. So this is looking pretty rough for me because Gandhi has decent strength. He's fixed his actions. He has okay science. His science is not amazing, but it is close to mine. He's beating me on culture. The only thing I have is that thanks to Eleanor, I just discarded a bunch of cards and have a ton of culture saved up. And so I have a lead. It'll take him some time to close this lead, but I would say that he now is in the better position because he has good military, a big stockpile of resources, which you have to value. I mean, resource production, sure, I'm not that far behind him, but he has a big stockpile. He is quite corrupt here, but he's probably in the best position at the moment, and he takes his cards, and we go over to Alexander. So Alexander grabs Nobel. It is time to replace the leader. This is actually his last chance to do so. The only other leader is Watt, which is, too little, too late, because the Age 2 upgrades have already happened. He plays the leader, Nobel, to stem the bleeding a little bit, raises population, grabs team sports. He can't make it because of the plunder, though. He had the rocks for it in the actions, but he can't do it because the science was taken from him, and just grabs a raft of yellow cards, and he passes the turn. So now, let's go over to Age 3. I lose my drama, theology, and irrigation. Irrigation doesn't matter because I got selective breeding. Theology doesn't matter because I took that organized religion sort of stupidly. And then the drama, well, that might hurt. I did not get one of the operas. What we're going to do, I think, is take one more turn here. This game ended up having way more commentary than I thought, so I think I'm going to split it up into 2, or maybe I'll just pause and stitch 2 videos together. Anyways, we'll take a turn here and we'll do kind of like an informal pause before we see what's happening in Age 3. When Age 3 starts, I make a very significant decision, what to do with my turn. And here, I need to fix my happy faces. So 2 actions and 3 rocks with masonry are being tied up, definitely doing organized religion. But what to do with the other 5 actions? I can't upgrade the organized religion. No, I can. I can upgrade organized religion and a farm, but I cannot research them both. So I have to make a choice about which one I want to do, and it has to be the organized religion because otherwise I'm corrupt. So what do I do with all my actions? Well, I think the correct thing to do with my actions is probably to take this oil. Because remember, I have Transcontinental Railroad, and it goes great with oil. It would give me huge rock production right at the beginning of the age. If I play organized religion, I'm going to steal a little bit of science from Alexander. I can still do oil next time. And I could even, if I want, take like breakthrough rich land to help me research it and pay for the upgrade. With 7 actions, let's see, 6, 5 after upgrading. Yeah, I could do oil, breakthrough rich land, or oil, opera, breakthrough, or like even oil and revolutionary idea, though I think breakthrough makes more sense. It's one less action to take, one less action to use for only one less science. I think that's the move. I think you got to do it. It's not that likely that my opponents are going to hate draft the oil. There is another copy that would reduce their inclination to hate draft. Neither one of them needs oil. He doesn't. So I could have left it here and just risked it wheeling over, or I could have taken it now to avoid any threats that someone would be frisky or whatever and decide to take it. But what I do instead, after stealing, let's make a note here, I'm a very high strength ahead of Alexander. I get to steal 14 strength or 14 science worth of stuff from him. I get to take both the navigation and the code of laws and 2 extra science, which is just brutal, a brutal thing to see here. I play an event. I play the Wealthy Territory. It's the Politics of Strength, so poor Alexander can't even draw cards while I draw 5 cards. Sadly, no war is drawn here, but, I'm getting through the deck, so I'm hopefully increasing my odds of getting a war next time. I decide to research organized religion, fix my corruption, and then put the Suez Canal under construction. And I think that's a mistake. So this is cool. It's cute that I can spend 2 actions to make it next turn. It's cute that I can take this vast territory and get 4 workers here. That certainly is nice, but that is a lot of actions. I think the smarter thing to do was, if I wanted to build it, I should have waited and let it wheel over. It's not that likely either of my opponents would have wanted it, and I could have gotten it for 2 actions less. I could have taken the oil this turn, or if not the oil, I could have taken a lot of cards this turn that would have been useful. Like, all these are useful yellow cards, even the opera for a culture later. So I do think I messed up and kind of sabotaged myself a little bit. I'm already in a pretty good position because the first card in the deck is oil when I have the railroad and I'm hoping for oil. So that's a really big swing that may even put me in a better position compared to Gandhi. Like previously I said, I thought Gandhi was the strongest player here with his culture generation and all around strong economy, having gotten his actions fixed. But now with oil here, I may actually be the front runner, but I blew it. I just didn't take it, and I wasted 2 extra actions at minimum taking the Suez Canal, possibly more if you say, well, it's actually not even worth undertaking at all. It would have been 5 actions and 10 rocks to build from the first action spot. And so if that's a mistake, then that's at least 5 actions wasted. Here I'm actually wasting 7, so I'm really, really hurting myself by taking it. For my last action, I do grab the breakthrough because I want to research oil someday. It's going to cost me because I don't have quite enough science to do it next turn. Oh yeah, that's actually a good point. I can't research oil next turn without revolutionary idea. That's something to think about. So yeah, maybe that was a reason not to take the oil. If I take it, I still can't actually make it. It might be smarter to take the revolutionary idea, hope that the oil doesn't get hate drafted, and then play it and take and research oil the following turn. So I grabbed the breakthrough though, so that I can, it's just 3 science for an action. I feel like that was better than the rocks or the food. And then I pass the turn, and I think what we're going to do here is pause at the start of Gandhi's turn, and then we'll either stitch this together and make this into a separate video. You can already see the video length and know which one I chose. Okay, so Gandhi offers scientific cooperation. I think this is a good window for us to pause on. All right, we're going to stitch them together, and it all begins here in H3 with the Scientific Cooperation Pact. And this may seem like, okay, Gandhi offers it to the other weak player, and they accept, and we move on. But I actually think this is a pretty interesting scientific cooperation for a few reasons. So we're going to talk about it because this video is long, so might as well dig in deep. So here's the thing. Let me actually pause for a second. So Gandhi has computers available here. He can research them, and he can upgrade them. And Alexander, being a strong player, can see that Gandhi can do this. So the fact that Gandhi has 4 and Alexander has 7, that's not fooling anybody. Like, it's pretty obvious that here Gandhi is going to research computers and upgrade them both and go up to 12. So now Gandhi has way more science to work with than Alexander, and Gandhi is going to get to use the scientific cooperation first. So you might say, well, Alexander should have rejected it because he's going to benefit less from it. In fact, I might have actually rejected this pact in Alexander's shoes because it was obvious that Gandhi was going to have so much more science. And the thing is, in the past, I've been like, oh, well, even if your opponent gets more than you, as long as they don't get twice as many techs than you still benefit compared to the other player. That's true, but Alexander is, well, he's basically going to lose this game. I mean, it doesn't necessarily look like it with the culture and the production situation, but he's got massive issues with corruption here. He's got the team sports. He'd have to spend pretty much all of his science to fix that. He just lost 12 sciences worth of technologies. He was spied upon and lost even more science. I mean, he's been hit really hard, and at this point, it's without any military, literally any, and with a yellow token bank that's completely just dead, with only one selective breeding, he is basically approximately accurate to say he's out of the game. I do think that it was smart of him to stay in, and I think it's reasonable to say, hey, maybe I can crawl along and one opponent wipes out the other with a big war, something like that. But, he's out of the game, and maybe his best chance would be to, beat one of the other players. So giving one of the other players an advantage by giving them a lopsided scientific cooperation, I would have thought, that kind of undoes the idea of even if your opponent benefits more, then you should do it, because he's probably not going to beat me at this point. And so trying to also make it so that Gandhi gets an advantage against him seems like a poor idea. But on a deeper level, there is this thing that, okay, in the tournament, none of the other 3-player games have finished. All we've finished so far are the 4-player games. He's in the lead with 9 points. I'm second with 7, and Gandhi is currently in last. So, in a weird way, if you think, okay, I pretty much have no chance of winning this, let's give an advantage to the person who's currently last in the standings, so that the person who is second place behind me is less likely to get the full 5 points from this game. And I think that, I don't know if that's what he was thinking or not. Maybe he's like, oh, scientific cooperation, and clicked it. I don't know. But I actually think that there's a good chance that if it wasn't for me analyzing this game, if that had just come up to me, I would have canceled or rejected the scientific cooperation. And I also think as Gandhi, I wouldn't have even offered it. Now, maybe he didn't have an aggression to do. Maybe he didn't have an event that he was willing to play. So maybe there was no cost to spending his political action to offer the scientific cooperation. But I do believe that both of my higher rated opponents outplayed me here in different ways. Gandhi offered a pact I might not have offered in his shoes, and Alexander accepted it when I might not have accepted it had I been in his shoes, so I learned a little bit of something from both of them. Anyway, Gandhi does go ahead and build the labs, and with his extra action, he researches riflemen, and he can even upgrade one more of them just to get a little bit of strength. I'm not sure why he wanted this, but it is essentially a free military action. It doesn't cost him a draw, and if he is going to try to keep up with me on strength, or maybe even overtake me on strength, or perhaps use Alexander as a culture sponge at the end, then getting these military actions spent to H2 units to get them ready for an H3 tactic makes a lot of sense. All right, so he passes the turn. It's over to Alexander. I'm not going to analyze his moves too much. He's pretty much hanging by a thread here. He researches team sports. He fixes his happy faces. And then he takes cavalrymen, because he does need military tactics. These cavalrymen end up being extremely important this game. He goes ahead and researches them. He plays the reserves for food, which is just enough then to make a worker, and then he can make a cavalryman, and then he doesn't change tactics or anything, but he's, a little bit less behind. Now, luckily for him, I don't have any more aggressions to play. So what I do... Sorry, I was thinking ahead here. I was just reviewing this. I in fact, have an aggression to play, unluckily for him. He's 12 strength behind. He would have needed 3 defense cards to defend. Remember, the politics of strength hit, so he actually didn't draw cards this turn, and I was lucky enough to get an occupy from that same politics of strength, so it was a really consequential event that not me put in there. I steal some rocks and some culture, but the most important thing I steal is yet more science. This guy has had, I think, 12 raw science stolen from him, and 12 sciences worth of technologies. I mean, it's just an astronomical setback. I don't know if I've ever seen someone this brutalized on the scientific front. The science is important because it lets me not get punished for my last turn's mistake, putting that Suez Canal under construction instead of taking a revolutionary idea. Now I get to take and research oil, and I upgrade an oil. So now I'm making huge amounts of rocks thanks to my transcontinental railroad. What to do with the rest of my actions? Well, I have just enough science, thanks to the Occupy, to also research selective breeding and upgrade it and start fixing my food. Now, I don't have quite enough rocks to upgrade the other farm, which I would have if I did. So I take Revolutionary Idea. This ends up looking like a really silly move, but I think it's, in retrospect, fine because I am low on science production, and what ends up happening is something I wasn't really thinking about, though maybe I could have been. There's a multimedia here. Maybe I could have been thinking, maybe that instead of this Revolutionary Idea. Not that I would take it right now, but maybe like that's a thing I should have been eyeing, and it makes this not really worth it. Could have taken Engineering Genius. I could have taken Military Theory just to deprive one of my opponents of the actions. I also actually thought about taking Bill Gates because Gandhi, on his turn, these leaders weren't here. On his turn, he built these 2 labs, which makes sense. There's a lot of lab-based leaders. Jobs, Gates, Sid, all like labs. Einstein, fine with labs. So there's basically all 4 science leaders are in the game. So he's set up for them, and okay, 2 of them come out. And now with Bill Gates, he could start generating 6 extra rocks per turn and actually exceed me on rocks. Well, time me after I build the Suez. So that's really strong. I thought about depriving it. And ultimately, I decided not to. I was like, well, you know what? Let's fight rocks for rocks. At least he loses 3 culture per turn if he does this. And if I take Bill Gates, I'll just take Sid. So I figured it was not really worth taking a kind of crappy leader for me, just 2 rocks per turn and 2 points at the end. With 1 computer's gone, so I might not be able to upgrade him in time when there's another good option for my opponent available anyways. All right, so it's up to Gandhi. I don't draw a war, by the way, which is a problem for me. We get the economic progress just in time. I am very lucky that this was near the bottom of the stack, so I actually get to benefit from the oil. That's a really, really good stroke of fortune for me. He grabs the genius. He researches opera, raises population, makes an opera. He upgrades some more swordsmen, not using up his draws, and he takes democracy. Now that's interesting. I would have thought he would take Bill Gates, maybe Sid, but he actually chooses to take neither, and he also doesn't take military theory. So I think this is, to me, I would have thought this was a little bit frivolous when you already have the constitutional monarchy, and there's like 3 really important cards for you to take, but it ends up working out pretty well for him, so maybe there's some merit to this. He certainly does end up using the extra actions that he gets from democracy, so it could just be a good move that I missed, or it might be a mistake, and the obvious thing of just taking Gates and military theory would have been stronger. All right, so Alexander's up. He gets some science. He gets mechanized agriculture, which is kind of interesting. He only has 1 of these selective breeders, so by getting that, he can really fix his food. Although he actually surprises me now. He builds another farm. He could have just disbanded a warrior and built another selective breeding, but he decides to really push the food. He then makes a cavalryman and gets hussars. And now he's getting to the point where he can, start thinking about holding his own here. His food's fixed. His military's not fixed, but it's almost fixed. His main issue is that took all of his military actions, so he doesn't draw any cards, and he's really vulnerable to an aggression here. We know that the Occupy went through, so it's very likely that an aggression would go through. Unluckily for me, oh, hang on a second. I beg your pardon. We've already had that turn, haven't we, we've already had the politics of strength. But still, he used up all his military actions, so he's not going to draw any cards. And I do have the armed intervention, though it's not super impressive, just because it is just stealing 7 points from someone who's already losing. So I don't get to take more resources from him, but, when you're behind, take risks. He grabs the endowment, he grabs modern infantry to maybe fix some more strength later, and he passes the turn. So on my turn, I don't play the armed intervention, I play an event, and it flips up the strategic territory, which I really thought I was going to win. And I was actually agonizing over my turn, like, how am I going to do this after I win this colony? Because obviously I need to win the colony. But actually Gandhi wins it. He does have to spend 2 units and 2 cards to take it, but this is a big setback because that gives him 4 strength instead of me, so it's an 8-point swing between us. And he also draws a bunch of cards, which is important because I did get this tactic, the positional army, which is perfect. It was good that I got that from the politics of strength because I got the rifleman that I took from H2, so now I can actually activate this, and with an air force, I can get a big army. I've got food about to be fixed. I did do the Suez Canal for 4 extra yellow tokens, so I can get a bunch of tokens out of here, and maybe even make 2 armies. But the problem is, I think I have a chance of winning this without that, and I don't want to go all in on military and risk not drawing a war. I don't want to randomly lose the game to Gandhi just because I never drew a war. So I really wanted this to get the 5 cards to possibly draw a war, but alas, he actually beats me. He bids 13 over my 12, and I don't get the colony. Now, in this game, what I learned, agonizing over every single turn from here on out, is that civil actions are actually really important. I really was struggling, not with the military actions, not with rocks, or even with food to make workers. It was just the civil actions to make a worker to put on the army that I was having major problems with all in H3. So winning the colony kind of scared me a bit because I was like, oh, I'm going to have to build this worker back and spend a civil action to get him. But luckily, quote unquote, I didn't win the colony after all. So I end up, not having to deal with the consequences. Maybe I should have just done an armed intervention and stolen 7 points from Alexander, but I wanted to flip that colony because I put it in. I knew it was in there, and I really thought for sure that I was going to win it. So my whole plan of playing an event was to win the colony. But since I don't win the colony, what do I get to do instead? Well, I guess one theme of this game is just opportunism. Just taking what's in front of you, not getting so lost in your planning and your strategy that you fail to take advantage of the opportunities that land in front of your face. Here's communism. You don't often get to do this. I wasn't really planning on it, but I just haven't gotten a good leader yet for H3, and there it is. So I can take it, and I can revolution into it. I do miss out on draws, but I thought, you know what? I think I can actually win this game on culture. So let's go for the communism. I now take multimedia. By the way, I already built the Suez Canal. I take the multimedia. I upgrade a farm, raise population, and I upgrade a mine. So now I am ready to go. I am going to play multimedias, and next turn I can even make 2 of them and go up to 8 culture. Now Gandhi is making 10, and he's about to jump ahead of me. But, I go up to 8, and I'm also going to start getting some science. I feel kind of stupid that I threw away impact of science and impact of culture. I could have definitely thrown away historic territory and military alliance or whatever. Maybe that wasn't in my hand yet. I definitely could have thrown away other cards, but I threw them both away, and I'm thinking, man, I actually maybe could have actually beaten him on science if he never builds that 3rd lab, which maybe he won't now that he allowed these lab-based leaders to fall off the board. So I decide to pursue that line, and I think it's worth it to spend the 1 science and my military draws for the turn to get communism, because that gives me a bigger building limit, and I may be able to actually make 4 multimedias. Even if not that, the extra military actions could be useful to build up a big army if I need to defend myself and or if I do draw a war on the next turn. So Gandhi plays an event. It's emigration, nothing happens. He grabs civil service, pushes up the civil actions for himself by 2. He puts the fast food under construction. He raises population, gets out of corruption, building a horse. He's really close to me on strength now. Makes another population and takes patriotism, which landed here for him. I maybe should have considered spending 2 actions to take this, though that would have required, some setback in my development. Maybe I could have done that instead of taking communism. Maybe I should have taken the patriotism and just been okay with my military actions and not skip my draw for the turn. So he grabs it. Very fortunate for him that it landed there. And then since both I and Gandhi passed on air forces, Alexander, of course, is going to get to have those, which gives him quite a lot of defense. He raises population thanks to his monstrous food production, makes another horse, grabs the efficient upgrade for the future, grabs democracy himself to follow in Gandhi's footsteps on that one. He gets 6 points for being in last, takes the air force's rockets, and upgrades his other farm. So now he's going to be able to even pull tokens out of this final bank if he wishes. And that's his turn. So now I don't play an event. I definitely could have played an event, but I didn't really want this historic territory in there. It causes chaos at the end sometimes, where someone might just throw away everything and it doesn't even matter, and then they win the colony and score 11 points on you, or maybe you're in a war and don't want to sacrifice units. So I didn't want to do it, so I just chucked this aggression at him. I maybe shouldn't have done that, because I kind of wish I had it later, but I'd go for it. He does have a defense card, so he is able to block it, and now I take Einstein. I wasn't really thinking about Einstein, but there he is. And I had multimedia, there it was. So it's okay, I guess this is what we're doing. We're going to play Einstein, research multimedia, and we're going to start getting lots of points, researching text with Einstein. I make 2 multimedias, go up to 14 science, feel horrible about the fact that I threw away impact of science, and I'm making 8 culture. Now Gandhi is making 10, but I'm still ahead of him on culture after my turn ends. And crucially, spaceflight is in the game. So every Age 3 technology that I research is actually worth 6 points for me. And I have a lot of actions thanks to communism and this code of laws I stole from Alexander. So I figure it's worth it to just push for culture and try to win the game that way. Now here I do make a bit of a mistake. I get a little too excited about Einstein. I take engineering and professional sports, and I just leave this patriotism there. This is a big mistake. I was just thinking, I got tons of rocks, got tons of military actions, I don't need patriotism. Well, this is why you need to calculate things in this game, okay, everybody? This is why you need to do this thing called thinking, because sometimes when you think about something, you realize that actually something that seems like a good idea is actually a dumb idea. And I really should have taken this patriotism. Now, what should I have given up instead of patriotism? Well, maybe the engineering. I took it because I thought it might be helpful for building spaceflight faster and maybe sneaking out an extra wonder. In some cases, it might be helpful to build a library for 2 extra rocks cheaper. And engineering goes great with pro sports. Pro sports costs 4 rocks with engineering, which is actually kind of ridiculous. 4 rocks for 4 strength, or for 4 power is really, really good. It's like a good ratio. And it ends up being relevant in this game, but I probably should have just not taken the engineering, dealt with the 6 rock cost, and saved 4 rocks by taking a patriotism. So now, Gandhi must have been thrilled to bits that I'm punting the game in his direction. He plays an event. It's freedom of movement, which I believe I put in. Let's see what he does with that. He moves a worker from cavalryman to opera for 3 rocks, so he gets 3 extra culture. He plays patriotism that he got last time, rebuilds the horse, grabs Steve Jobs, which I think is the worst of the science leaders for him. He would have, I'm sure at this point, rather had Gates or Sid Meier, but I guess he maybe had just really valued that democracy that he took and didn't want to take a leader, but now this is the last science leader available, so he grabs Jobs, takes military theory for military actions, which he'll need, takes the urban growth, raises population, he gets the democracy down, and yes, he's going to pick up these other cards as well. So he's just got a big, big pile of cards. It's a very good shadow army with the military theory and these cards and all these actions. The military theory fixes his military actions, so those aren't an issue. And it's going to be hard for me now to declare war on him, which I definitely was thinking about because I drew 2 wars. It's like, oh, God, if I had just drawn one of these wars earlier, I would have played differently. Instead of going for the multimedias, or maybe instead of going for 2 of them, I would have started getting to work on my armies. I maybe could have been able to make 2 full armies with an airplane, or even 2. I have enough military actions and rocks to pull that off, but I didn't have the war yet and I didn't want to commit to it, so I took the safer route. But now Gandhi's making 16 culture to my 8. It's not as bad as it looks because I could probably research a tech or 2 per turn with 14 science. Let's say 1.5 techs per turn. That's sort of 4.5 extra points per turn. So I'm really at 12.5, let's say on average. That's not that far behind 16, and I can push it more. And I have more rocks than Gandhi does, and my spaceflight is going to be bigger than his fast food chains. Fast food chains ends up being in the low 20s. Spaceflight for me ends up being 34 points. It could have been bigger. We get a little bit unlucky. The deck is very front-loaded with a lot of technologies, and at the end of it's a lot of leaders and yellow cards. So that's 34 with not necessarily great luck. Of course, maybe I shouldn't have taken engineering, so fine. Then it would have been 32. But still, 32 is a very big wonder. 22 is a big wonder. 32, I think, is a very big wonder. And so since I was thinking my spaceflight was going to be bigger than his fast food chains, my culture production is roughly equal to his when you factor in Einstein's 3 points per technology and my now amazing science. I thought, I can beat him on culture. And so I wasn't super worried about the culture generation he was getting from Gowdy here. He even has an action left over. He plays the engineering genius and builds the first stage of the fast food chains. And then he passes the turn. So Alexander plays, he plays an event, it's Cold War, Gandhi and I get some free science, which is great for both of us. He follows Gandhi's footsteps, he's got a ludicrous amount of actions. He's got 7 from democracy, 8, 9, 10 from each of his wonders. So actions, he's got a lot of them, but that doesn't guarantee he'll have a good game. He upgrades his final mine, so now he's cooking, now his production's up there, but the problem is, he's behind. His culture is less than it looks like compared to mine because I'm getting the Einstein points and he is not. He also can't replace Nobel. I mean, he can, but if he does replace Nobel, Gandhi and I both have all the science, and it'll be a lot easier for us to research 2 technologies in 1 turn to get the Nobel Prize than it is for him with only 7 science per turn. He also is behind on military, so he has to constantly be worried about being taken over. So even though on the culture front and the economy front, it looks like he's okay, I don't really think he was. He raises population, makes another library, he grabs some science, just taking all these cards, and he passes the turn. So on my turn, I play an event. I was thinking about declaring a war. Let's talk about this colony in a second, actually. I was definitely thinking about declaring a war, but I realized I couldn't actually do it. And let's walk through why. You might say, hey, Boris, you kind of got lucky. There's an Air Force there. And there's your space flight. All right, you can spend 4 actions to take space flight, 3 actions take and research Air Forces, and then with this freedom of movement, you turn a lab into a cannon, and then you have just enough to research the airplane. But the problem is that I don't have enough military actions to do all the things that I would want to do in a war. If you think about it, right, oh, hang on a second. I think I'm miscommentating here because I do need to take spaceflight and that eats into my actions. But imagine spaceflight hadn't shown up. This is to just demonstrate in principle why not taking patriotism was a mistake despite seemingly having endless supplies of rocks and military actions. Suppose I declare a war, I have this positional army. To get this army online with an airplane, I need 1 military action to build the airplane, 2 military actions to upgrade these riflemen into, these swordsmen into riflemen. So that's 3 military actions. I need a 4th military action to play this tactic. And then I would need a 5th to actually make a cannon if this freedom of movement were not here. So that's 5, and then it takes me 3 military actions to declare a war over culture, which is 8. But I only have 7. If I had had a patriotism, then I could have actually declared a war and gotten a fully up-to-date positional army with 2 rifles, 2 cannons, and an airplane. Now, it ends up being different because we have the freedom of movement, which gives me the ability to save a military action by turning a lab into a cannon, and I also need to take spaceflight for half of my turn, because I think it'd be crazy not to. And if I take it, then I don't have enough actions to take Air Forces, and research riflemen, and generate a worker. I don't quite have enough. But it's just something to think about. When you've got a patriotism at the 1 action spot at H3, and actions enough to take it, really think about, are you absolutely sure you don't need those rocks and the military action? Because the military action can be very important. Okay, so anyway, I play an event. The Wealthy Territory comes up, which I actually didn't even want to win, but I was like, no, I can't let Gandhi have it. I bid 10, which is just a sword plus my 3, which is 5, plus my 2 defense cards, which is kind of like, you know what, it sucks having to pull a guy out and spend a civil action to get him back. And I was actually thrilled that Alexander beat me. So Alexander ended up having to throw away a bunch of defense cards, which might be important later if we play aggressions on him. This cavalryman is something he's going to have to rebuild with rocks, and the rocks for him are not completely trivial. He does have, rocks saved up, but still 5 rocks is 5 rocks. And so now I get to just focus on my turn without having to worry about rebuilding my army. I play the space flight. Oh boy, I hope this error doesn't stop me from doing the replay. I take the airplanes, I research riflemen, I make a population, and I upgrade these rifles and also build a cannon. Now, I'm not playing the army yet because there's no need to. Next turn, I won't have a problem playing this army. And I hatch an ingenious plan for next turn. So I've got a plan for how I'm going to have an effective war. It's really tricky because Gandhi is going to be able to take rockets, and he could very well have a modern army. And thanks to this patriotism that I left him and these reserves that he had and this military theory, he's got no problems building up a pretty good army. So me with just, the positional army and 1 airplane is not going to cut it. So I can't really do it on Gandhi, and Alexander's also a bit of a scary fellow to aggress upon. Might not look like he has that much, but he does have revolutionary idea for getting one of these military techs down. He's got military buildup and 19 rocks saved. So it took quite a lot of thinking, and I was really agonizing about how I'm going to finish the space flight and also pull off a good enough war that I can actually steal culture from somebody. Had I won the Wealthy Territory, I probably would have needed to turn this lab into a cannon to make up for the military action that I will need to spend to build back the unit, instead of doing what I actually did, which is to move alchemy into multimedia for 3 extra culture per turn. All right, so now I am a little corrupt, though it's okay. It's not a huge deal. I draw 2 more wars and a peace treaty, which is unlucky because I really wanted an event. But I could have kept Impact of Science all those turns ago, and then I wouldn't have needed this luck. So this is why it's very important when you're saying to yourself, oh, this is bad and I was unlucky, really check to make sure that that's actually the case, because there's a good chance that you wouldn't have even needed to be lucky to do the thing that you wanted to do in the first place. All right, so Gandhi's up. He plays an event. its impact of architecture, which is a little bit sad because, as you'll see, my impact of architecture is about to improve, and I could have actually generated some non-trivial points against him. As it is, we just tie. He grabs the rockets. He grabs pro sports, which cost 1 thanks to Gaudi. He researches the Gaudi and scientific method. He researches them. He researches the rockets. He gets the modern army, which he does have, and he raises population, makes another theater. Honestly, it is a pretty strong situation for him. I really underestimated, I think, at the time, how strong Gandhi's position was. When I was doing commentary, I was like, oh yeah, Gandhi looks like he might win, and maybe now that I have oil, I'll catch up. But when I was playing, I really thought once I had oil, it was locked in the bag. But this is very far from locked. I need the points from Einstein and the extra value of the space flight versus his fast food chains to really do a lot of work, because he's like 20 points ahead of me ending his turn. Now, granted, I catch up 11, then another technology is another 3, and then my space flight's going to be another 10 points to him, but he's playing events when I'm not, so he's getting culture from that. And he does have this lead that he's been able to keep up by riding Gaudi all the way to the finish line. Now, the one good thing is that Gandhi did not declare war on Alexander. He either didn't have a war or he chose not to do it. It's possible he didn't have one. I do have 4 of them, but there are, this isn't actually talk about the hands. There are 7 wars. So there are another 2 wars over culture that he could have drawn. We did go pretty deep into the deck, and he did get the colony that drew him 5 extra cards. So he may have drawn a war. He might have drawn a hybrid war, which, okay, that would have been a little weird. He would have had to rely on pro sports, I think, to pull off that one. But Alexander is actually a lot stronger than he looks. With 19 rocks, the ability to make air forces, just piling up these hussars is quite effective. So I think Gandhi was correct, if he had a war, not to declare it on Alexander, because while he could have done military theory, gotten more military actions, and still had the actions to pay for his war and also build the army like this, it would have meant giving up on some culture, and Alexander may very well have still been able to actually beat him. So anyway, Gandhi passes the turn. And now Alexander is up. And I actually think I would make the exact same move that he did. I remember looking at the situation because I was really obsessing about this game and I was so horrified. Like, it would have been such a coup to win this game, get 5 points. Alexander comes in last, gets 0 because he's the leader of the group. Yes, getting second would still have been good, and Gandhi getting 5 would not have been that big of a deal because he's currently last, but it would have been so strong and so helpful for me to win this game that I was just agonizing over it for like a pair of days, I think, like the 2 days that we were in age 3. And I basically looked after everyone made a move, and I think I predicted his move. Now, granted, it's maybe not that complicated because strategically, perhaps it's not the most complicated move on Earth. What do you do here as Alexander now that we've just hit age 4? Well, you could build units, but if no one declares war against you, then that was a waste. You could go like whole hog and grab like Hollywood and get ready to do Charlie Chaplin movies, but then if someone does declare war, then you're too committed. So I think he makes the right call here to play this. You take and play Chaplin. You then play Revolutionary Idea so you can research movies. Now you need to make a movie, so you need a worker, and then you make a movie. Now that's 8 culture extra thanks to Chaplin, because Chaplin gives culture equal to the culture of your best theater, and the H3 theaters make 4 culture. So boom, suddenly culture has increased by 8. Now what to do with the last 4 actions? Well, you increase your shadow army. You take the reserves, the revolutionary idea, and then the urban growth doesn't really matter that much. It's the last thing there. But now with the revolutionary idea, he's able to research air forces, and with the military buildup and the reserves, he's able to generate a lot of units. He can blow up all these libraries. Of course, he can also blow other stuff up as well. He has enough workers and enough actions to generate workers to make a pretty big army. So he passes the turn here. I think I would have done the exact same thing in his shoes, and it's over to me. Now, my plan from the previous turn was to actually use pro sports as a kind of military unit and help my army be stronger, despite the fact that I only am going to have 1 army with air forces. A lot of times, 1 army with air forces isn't enough, but I decided to just bank on flat strength, being sufficient to pull off a sufficient war against Alexander. It's also important to wait until age 4 is here. So I could have actually done the war last turn, but I didn't have enough strength last turn, I thought, to pull off a good war, and I had other things I needed to do. But this turn, this is my last chance, this is anyone's last chance to declare a war, and since we're in age 4, then Alexander can't resign, which is important. I was thinking, like, I actually need to get legitimate culture from this war to beat Gandhi. And if Alexander had resigned, I would have only gotten 7 culture from that. Now again, he was already in age 4 when his turn started, so I could have achieved that effect by declaring war last time, but this time it's for sure. So how do we go about this war? Well, we declare the war, and we're going to just slap down all 3 technologies here: the pro sports, the engineering, and the air forces. Now we're going to make 3 workers. 1, 2, 3. So it seems like I only have 1 usable worker, but pro sports gives me 4 strength and 4 happy faces, so it turns the other workers that were unhappy into usable workers, and I can pop them both onto airplanes. I do the 2 airplanes instead of doing another pro sport because the airplane, I mean, it's just 1 extra strength. So I figured that was worth it. And I actually do have a useful way to use my last civil action, which is that I take fundamentalism. This is not going to help with space flight, and it's not going to help with anything because it's replacing a H3 government. In fact, if anything, it's actually going to cost me because communism has 7 civil actions and fundamentalism only has 6. So I'm going to actually lose 2 points if impact of government is there. But hey, it's 3 points to research it. I figured that was worth it and also kind of funny. And I will have just enough science to actually research it. So this revolutionary idea that I paid 3 actions for ends up being completely useless. But at the time I took it, I had no idea I was going to be playing with Einstein or multimedia. And there wasn't much else for me to take then. And I only had 5 science production. So I feel like it was an okay turn. It just ended up being kind of funny the way that it worked out. So we end up with, after playing the tactic, 62 strength, which looks like I'm going to just break his bank, right? I mean, I am like almost 40. I'm 30. No, I'm not almost 40. I'm almost 50. I'm 49 points ahead of him. 49. So yeah, it looks like this is going to be a blowout. But, you know, this is why you got to pay attention to people's shadow armies. So Gandhi plays. He plays an event. It's national pride. He actually beats me by 1 culture. 1. So this is a 10-point swing. He wins it because of a 1 culture lead. It's horrifying. He plays Steve Jobs at the end. Mostly irrelevant. It just gives him 4 culture once. He gets the military theory finally. He plays reserves for 8 rocks. He raises his population. Makes another farm. I needed to pay attention to this, by the way. I should have. I missed this. He makes another farm. We're going to come back to that in a little bit. And then he builds his fast food chains. So that's the turn. And now Alexander, I was kind of hoping, by the way, that by leaving Hollywood here, he would just like take it and build it. Which is obviously not correct. It's correct to build up your military instead of building a Hollywood. But I thought, you know, maybe there's a chance he just gives up and feels like building a wonder. I could have made this fall off the rack by taking an efficient upgrade instead of a fundamentalism. And I could have used efficient upgrade to like spend my extra rocks to build an age A farm and then upgrade it to an age 3. But I thought, you know, fundamentalism's 3 guaranteed culture, and maybe he'll build Hollywood, but of course he's not going to do that. He plays the revolutionary idea, plays the air forces, makes a worker. He gets 10 rocks from the military buildup, and that's going into an airplane. He then destroys his libraries and builds, after spending reserves for some more rocks, another airplane and 2 more horses. And in fact, with 2 actions left and 7 rocks, he even blows up a temple and then makes another airplane. So he goes up from 13 to 46. And this is why Gandhi was in a tricky spot. It was not exactly the easiest thing in the world for Gandhi to get in a war off of an Alexander. I mean, he could have, but then he probably would have had to give up making the fast food chains. So I mean, maybe he could have done it. He did have these 8 extra rocks left over. Gandhi did have a lot of actions to work with and 8 extra rocks left over, so maybe he could have done it. But Alexander had a surprising amount of strength. When he went all in, he managed to get up 36 strength. But still, I am still 16 points ahead of him, so I steal 21 points, and that's a big wonder. That's Gandhi's fast food chains right there. So on my last turn, I kind of grumble about the fact that I don't have an event to play. I steal 21 points from Alexander, and now we have a little bit of a cleanup turn. Fundamentalism, just to get 3 science from Einstein. I raise my population. I finish the space flight. Now with 4 rocks, what to do? Well, Gandhi built a farm, which means that impact of food might be in there. That's actually worth a lot of points to him for food. It would be worth 6 extra points, 2 for the farm, plus another 4 for the bonus of exceeding your consumption. And there's also impact of balance. Food's his lowest thing, so 2 extra food means he's getting 4 extra points for impact of balance. I should have been like, yeah, let's pay attention to what my opponent's doing here. And I should have made a farm. I didn't, however. I could also have made a temple just for an extra culture and an extra happy face in case impact of happiness is in there. But I chose to make a pro sports. And I don't know why I chose that. I know why I chose that. I'm saying I don't know in a figurative sense of like, I don't know how I could be so stupid as to do this. We already had Impact of Architecture, but for some reason I was just convinced that Impact of Competition was in there. And yes, it makes sense for Gandhi to have put in Impact of Competition. Absolutely. Yes, that makes sense. But you have to go based on what you're seeing as actual, tangible evidence that's occurring in the game, not just based on general principles. Gandhi didn't make his final moves like the person who put Impact of Competition. He made that move building the farm like someone who maybe put Impact of Food or Impact of Balance in there, or both. So this arena, I got nothing for it. It was just stupid. Well, it's not true. I didn't get nothing. I got a happy face, but I would have also gotten a happy face from a temple, and I would have also gotten an extra culture from that. So it was not a super consequential mistake, but absolutely a mistake. I had played the revolutionary idea for the principle of it all, and then with literally nothing I can do with my last few actions, I passed. So I start 17 points ahead of Gandhi, but he catches up 4 of them with the Impact of Balance, which I could have prevented by building a farm. Then we have Impact of Colonies, which we're all equal on, which is kind of impressive. I was the only one with a colonization bonus, but they each took a critical colony from me in H3. 1 wealthy territory and 1 strength territory. Maybe the wealthy I didn't actually care about that much. He then catches up another 2 points because he has an extra worker than me from Impact of Population. And with Happiness, okay, that is good. We tie on that. We both have the maximum. And the last event is Impact of Wonders, which I put in. So I actually get a couple of points ahead of him here. And so it's a bit of a close game, just a 15-point gap here. Sorry, 13-point gap is all it takes. And you'll notice that I did need that war against Alexander. I stole 21 points from him. If it had only been 7 points, because let's say he resigned, that would have been 14 fewer points, and I would have lost this game by 1 point. So it did need to be in H4 where he can't resign to make sure that I can actually win this game. But my god, I was over the moon about this one. So now I get 5 points ahead of Alexander, who was leading. So temporarily, I am in the lead in the standings. And I was able to win my 3-player game against the 2 highest rated opponents. So I was really happy with this one. I got really lucky because after getting hit hard in H1, I had a magical H2, and it was so magical that despite some serious self-sabotage in H3, and in my opinion, quite good play from Gandhi, I was able to stick it out and secure those extra 3 points for getting first place instead of second. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Hope you enjoyed it. Please like and or subscribe, and I'll see you again soon. Take care.